Unreal Engine 5.3. You know what's going to happen with Unreal Engine 10.3 comes out? You're never going to need to leave your house again.
Unreal Engine 5.3 just released, and it is a big deal. The main reason is nanite landscapes. When Unreal Engine 5 came out, it introduced a revolutionary new way to render geometry called nanites. To briefly sum up nanites, every object you see in computer graphics is made up of tiny flat planes of geometry called polygons. The more polygons you have in your environment, the longer it will take to render. This is why video games have made a system called level of detail, or LOD for short. The further away an object is from the camera, the less polygons it will use to render that object. This makes games run faster, but we are limited in the amount of geometric detail we can have. Nanite fixes this, because it uses dynamic level detail, which means you can have an object with millions of polygons without any LODs, because the geometry deforms, lowering the amount of polygons on an object. A good example of nanite in use is this city.
I don't know how this works, but that sounds crazy. I heard this from Ashes of Creation, is they said something like moving over to Unreal 5 actually made the game run better. It's like, how rare is it that you have something that's like a quality upgrade and also a playability and like detail upgrade? Yeah, this is the Matrix demo.
If I come up to lit, nanite, triangles, we can see nanite in action.
Oh, wow.
Every color is an individual polygon, and there are millions of them. The biggest issue with nanite is that when it released, it only worked on non-moving static objects. It was only really good for objects like rocks and cliffs. This changed with the Unreal Engine 5.1 update.
And you can see that because like in a lot of Unreal 5 games, like the rocks and like the environment of the game looks fucking phenomenal and everything else is like, okay.
It introduced nanite foliage, which gave us the ability to create forests with an unlimited amount of detail.
Yeah, like I
Here's
saw
a world with over 100,000 trees without any LODs.
Yeah, and like they can all even move around. I remember watching this video, it was fucking nuts. Every single tree can move around independently.
But landscapes, which is the biggest part of any environment, was still missing nanites. Landscapes allow us to create large open worlds easily. Using the tool, we can sculpt, add height maps, and paint different materials quickly. This means landscapes were stuck using low-resolution geometry, and it hurt our game's performance because Unreal has a hard time rendering non-nanite objects. In all the tech demos Epic Games released, to avoid these issues, they didn't use landscapes. Instead, they faked landscapes. This desert ground isn't actually a landscape. Instead, it is a bunch of nanite objects stacked on top of each other.
Very smart.
To make it look like a landscape. Finally, in 5.3, nanite officially supports landscapes. To activate nanite, select your landscape, and then within the details panel, enable nanite, and then build data. Now that it's enabled, we can watch the geometry dynamically deform. It is that easy to enable nanites on our landscapes. In the first version of...
So I guess whenever you zoom in, like you don't even tell because everything is just, it's so fine.
UE5, we made...
Like, I'm gonna be real, like I think this looks fucking insane. Like, this looks like I'd see, like whenever The Witcher 4 comes out, this is what I'd expect to see.
This village on the channel.
Holy
but
fuck.
At the time, the only objects using nanites were rocks and the buildings. Now in UE 5.3, the entire world is nanite. There isn't a single object that isn't using nanite. This means we can get an infinite amount of detail from our environments, and the performance is a lot better. Nanite landscapes can now also use tessellation to add more detail. In UE4, we had tessellation, which allowed us to create displacements from a high texture. When Unreal Engine 5 released, it was removed, but now it is back and it is using nanites. This means we can change objects from the material editor. We have a brand new input called displacement, where the high texture goes. Tessellation can convert any simple mesh into an object with thousands of polygons just with a texture.
Wow.
Here's an environment with a landscape that isn't using displacement. The world feels kind of flat.
Yeah.
And here's the same landscape with...
Jesus, and they can do that procedurally? What the fuck? It looks real? Yeah, I showed, so like, you know like that one Unreal 5 thing of the train station in like Japan or some shit? Do you guys remember this as Korea or something like that? Yeah, well anyway, I went and I showed this to my dad, and I said, do you know where this is? He's like, no, I don't know. He's like, maybe China or Japan. I'm like, nah, shit's fake. It's not even real. He's like, what the fuck? I said, yep.
Displacement. The ground has depth to it. and it looks a lot better.
Look at that.
Everything you see on screen, except the plants, is the landscape. All the
Yeah, it was
rocks, twigs, and
unironically
roots
fake.
are not objects. They are a height texture. And whenever
Oh
I
my
make a
God.
change to my landscape, the nanite displacement remains in effect.
Jesus.
For the first time in gaming, we're not limited by how many polygons are on screen. We can have infinite geometry everywhere. The next major feature is better volumetric fog and smoke.
Wait. This is what the
Unreal's had volumetric fog for a while, which gives us the ability to have realistic light scattering in
That
fog
looks
and
insane.
smoke. To enable volumetric fog is easy. You just have to click volumetric fog within the high.
Just click the button. That's what's so fucking crazy about this. It's like, okay, so you want to generate a lush forest? Okay, click the forest button. Boom. Okay, now you have a forest. Oh, you want a tree? Click the tree button. Oh, you don't want a tree. Oh, you want a different tree? Okay, click the randomized tree button.
Fog to turn it on.
Holy shit.
Now we get dynamic fog that interacts with the lighting. So I can move the sunlight around, and you'll see those God rays change direction. It is the secret to make any of your environments stand out.
God damn, that is amazing.
Here are before and afters of an animation with and without volumetric fog. The world feels more realistic, and it
You can tell this isn't Starfield because there's a vehicle.
looks visually more interesting with fog.
Yeah.
The only issue in Unreal was that it was problematic to create finely detailed fog.
Sure.
It could only be used to create large splashes, and it was hard to use volumetrics for complex shapes like explosions. Instead, explosions and smoke had to be faked with billboards. Billboards are just a flat surface with an animated texture.
Ooh.
You can see that this is just one single plane.
Not
The
so
smoke
good.
isn't actually 3D. Obviously,
Yeah, it
this
looks like
doesn't
shit.
look the best.
No.
Because when I move the lighting in my environment, the smoke stays exactly the same.
Yeah.
We don't see any changes because after all, this is just a flat 2D texture. In 5.3, sparse volume textures fix this. We can now import complicated volumetric simulations from programs like Jenga FX. Here is a sparse volume explosion imported from Jenga FX into Unreal. And if I pause the simulation, you can see it is not being faked by billboards. This smoke simulation is completely 3D.
Oh
If
my
I move the
God.
light around, it will dynamically change the way the smoke looks. The
Jesus Christ, that is fucking crazy. How the fuck do you do this?
smoke is able to cast
Oh my
shadows
God.
onto itself. We can even use sparse volume textures to represent clouds. And what's amazing
Low
about
res?
these
Yeah, it's
clouds
very
compared
low
to
res.
Unreal's
Yeah.
default cloud system is that I can move them around and rotate them. So I get full control over where my clouds are in the sky. And if we zoom out, we can even see that these clouds are massive objects that I can move around and place them exactly where I want them to be. Volumes can even replace some particle effects. For example, this fire here is very similar to the explosion.
And the thing is, like, this fire, let's be real, this fire is super low res. And I think that the worst thing about low res stuff is that, especially whenever it's in a high res environment, it looks worse. So, like, I mean, bro, they're going to fix it.
Where if I go into wireframe view mode,
Holy
it
shit.
is just a couple of 2D planes that simulate a fire animation.
Yeah.
And then if I look down directly at it, this effect immediately breaks.
Yeah,
And
it
now
looks
here's
like
that
shit.
particle effect, but it's replaced with a sparse volume texture. And this fire is now completely in 3D. It's not a 2D plane that's facing the camera. So
Holy
if we
fuck.
look at it from the top down, the
Yeah, it doesn't look scuffed at all.
effect doesn't break. This fire is real and it exists in our world. Another major feature is that we can now create animatable characters directly in Unreal Engine. In Unreal, we have been able to create rigs and animate characters. This animation you're looking at right now was animated entirely in Unreal. It wasn't created in another program like Blender or Maya. The biggest part missing in the character creation workflow was skeletal mesh editing, which is the process of creating bones in a character. UE 5.3 adds a skeletal mesh editor. This means we can create
Can you
bones
imagine if the Naga and WoW looked like this? Holy shit, that would be amazing.
and weight paint directly in the editor. It is now possible in Unreal through modeling, weight painting bones, rigging, and animating using Sequencer to create an entire character just using Unreal. We
Holy
also get a
fuck.
new cloth editor to create realistic simulations for clothes.
Jesus.
Users can define exactly how a cloth simulation can interact with the character.
Look at that.
And then artificial intelligence will bake that interaction into an animation.
See, this is one of the things that like people might not really understand is that like this is what people use AI for a lot. Is that they're not using AI just to completely make something new, but they use it to fill in the gaps.
Also got a major update. If you don't know, Unreal Engine 5 introduced a brand new
Because whenever people think of AI, what they think of is like those pictures that people generate with AI that always have like some uncanny nature to them, or at least like you can tell that most of these pictures are made by AI. And there's that, and also ChatGPT, which also can sometimes sound really stupid. But like there's all these other like uses for it.
System called Lumen.
Brute forcing
Lumen
tedious
gives us
stuff.
dynamic
Yes.
bounce lighting in
Exactly.
real time. It is important to know that bounce lighting is also called global illumination.
Holy shit.
Global illumination
I
is
think
the
they changed
process
this with
of light
5.2.
rays bouncing around, illuminating your entire world. Before Lumen, game developers faked global illumination through a process called light baking. Light baking is rendering bounce lighting before the game is played. This render is then stored in a texture called a light map, which is then overlaid on top of the world to make it look like the light is bouncing around in real time, when in reality, it's just a pre-rendered texture. But now the problem is that global illumination isn't real time. As soon as I make a change to our light map, it is no longer in sync. We have to rebake the entire environment all over again, which is time consuming.
Yeah.
This is why Lumen is a big deal, because it is true real-time global illumination.
Oh my God.
We don't have to bake our lights, but the downside is that Lumen is very expensive to run. Not every computer can run it because it is computationally intensive. This is why Unreal games like Valorant still use baked lighting. It is a competitive game, so every frame matters.
Yeah.
If we open up a Valorant map in Unreal, you will see it using baked lighting. If I move an object, the light doesn't
I actually didn't know that Valorant was made with Unreal Engine. I had no idea.
Updates until I rebake the environment. Even though Lumen exists, a lot of games still have to use baked lighting because it is just more performance. You could get 120 frames with baked lighting. It's hard to get that many frames with Lumen. Hardware hasn't caught.
See, that's the thing, right? Is that like every time that people say that, it's just a matter of for now. Because that's what people said about rendering a bunch of textures or like particles. And like now they have this nanite thing and then it's not as big of a deal.
Up yet.
Yeah, they'll figure
this
something
environment is using baked lighting. And one of the biggest issues with baked lighting is that it doesn't have any reflections. You'll see that this entire environment is broken because the reflections aren't working. And we can fix this by manually adding in reflections by using a reflection capture within Visual Effects, Sphere Reflection Capture. This will capture a 360-degree texture of my environment and then project it onto any reflective surfaces. The workflow to get reflections everywhere is that now I have to create another reflection capture and move it to where there's a bunch of reflections. And then I have to create another one and then continue the process throughout the entire environment. And if we have a large environment, this process can be very tedious.
Sure.
Here's an environment that's using Lumen and reflections work immediately.
Wow.
We do not need reflection captures.
Holy
but the
fuck.
issue is that we had to use Lumen Global Illumination.
I mean, that looks amazing. I'm gonna be real. Like that looks real to me.
Hurts our performance. In 5.3, we now have the ability to use Lumen reflections with baked lighting. So we do not have to use Lumen Global Illumination to get Lumen reflections. To get this feature, go to the post-process volume and set Global Illumination to none. So we're using the baked lighting and not Lumen. And then set reflections to Lumen. Now we're using baked lighting for global illumination and only using Lumen for reflections. We get the high performance of static lighting with the accuracy of Lumen reflections. Plus, we no longer have to set up reflection captures. Also, Lumen reflection now supports multiple bounces. So let's say we have a mirror
So what happens if you put two mirrors in front of each other? What happened?
Here, and then across the hallway we have another mirror.
Yeah.
Notice how we can't see the other mirrors in its reflection. That's because we don't have enough reflection bounces. So if we go back into the post-process volume under reflections, we have a brand new setting called max reflection bounces.
Put 999.
If I set this to 2, now we can see the reflections.
Oh, wow.
The modeling mode user interface got a facelift, and now it is a lot easier to use. All the tools are neatly organized into categories.
Looks like a good donut.
And let's say there's a tool I use a lot, like Displace. Then I can right-click and add to favorites, and now I can quickly access that tool within the favorites tab. Mass materials like foliage are now 20% faster,
Jesus.
and there are more shadow options.
Well, it looks, the way he says it's like an MMO patch.
For Nanite to help optimize shadows. Unreal shadow system called virtual shadow maps
Look at that.
are right now the main bottleneck to foliage. So this gives us more control over what types of shadows should trees cast. And finally, a big update for Mac users. Nanite is now supported on all Apple M2 devices. Finally, Apple users have access to both Lumen and Nanite. When UE5 first released, it didn't have either feature. This also means that Unreal Engine 5 with Lumen and Nanite will be able to run on the Apple Vision Pro.
Good.
The programs
Great.
you're developing now on Unreal could be used for the Apple Vision Pro in the future. The possibilities are endless for Unreal. These were all the major changes to UE 5.2, but these are just the ones I think are important. Of course, there's a bunch of other changes you can check out by going to the Unreal release notes. Unreal is more important than ever because half of all next-gen games are being made in UE 5. There's no better time to learn Unreal Engine.
Yeah, I feel like there are a lot of games that people are going to make in Unreal 5, and it's cool to see Valorant there too, because like Valorant isn't a realistic looking game. There's a lot of games that do look super realistic. You know, those can be very hit or miss, but there's definitely always going to be a way and like a place for like the very stylized games as well. But yeah, I think that Unreal 5 does really make it look, they make a lot of things look basically photorealistic. It's incredible.
And then now, luckily for you, I have an entire free course right here on YouTube, which goes over the essentials to learn UE5.
Yeah, that's incredible.
You can learn how to create this world
Holy
you see
shit.
right now. You can check it out, link in the description below.
Yeah, this is
Unreal.
fucking amazing. I'm going to be totally honest. Like, I love the Unreal stuff. Like, I watch every single update that they have, basically. Just because I love seeing, like, the amount of, like, progress that's made. Because, like, every single time that they have an update, and there's been, like, maybe... They do one of these updates. Yeah, there's the video, by the way. Like, this guy, we've watched a number of his videos before, and Unreal Sensei is his name. And I think they're fucking great. Because, like, I don't really keep up with it super, like, closely in terms of, like, as a developer. So, like, seeing videos like this is just incredible. It is amazing. Is he even real, though? I don't know. Download Unreal 5, Asmon, give it a shot. Yeah, I don't know, man. Tech demos are always great, but then Unreal games run like shit. Well, I think that Unreal games running like shit is usually because the developer is only trying to make the game look good and not make it run well. Like, I think that's more of a developer problem more than anything else. Yeah, it's a shit dev, exactly. Unreal 5 is just boring. Every game's going to look the same. I like engine diversity. Well, I mean, Valorant doesn't look anything like this. I mean, I don't think that's true. I think that... here's what I think is happening right now. What I think is happening right now is that a lot of people are able to create environments and landscapes that are so photorealistic and so detailed and amazing that everybody is trying to do it. They're trying to make that super photorealistic game that people can see and think that they're in real life. But that will wear off. It will. It will wear off, and then people will be more okay with other types of stylized games. And it is just simply, right now, that is simply the... That's the hype right now. That's the hype. And eventually it won't be. That's it. Yeah, that 1 FPS, unrecord. Yeah, I was thinking about that the other day. Yeah, unrecord. So art direction is going to matter more than graphics, but I do think graphics look great with this. And I do think that, yes, of course, you have a lot of developers that really shouldn't be... They should be focusing more on their gameplay and their art direction rather than their graphics. And Unreal 5 allows them to put out a trailer that looks fucking amazing but plays like garbage. That's definitely true. However, I don't think that's a problem with Unreal. I think that's a problem with the developer.